equality is honestly the basics that can be done. So to expect gratitude for it is, I don't know, I think a bit much.
First of all, can you tell us a bit about your journey and how you got into sports writing?
Sports journalism just sort of happened by accident. I honestly, starting out, wasn't too confident about writing about cricket and working in the cricket field, but I think I sort of grew into the job anyway. And I think one aspect of sports journalism which isn't spoken about as much is you have your sort of crazy fans, and then you have a lot of just casual fans. I think the challenge for a lot of sports journalism is to sort of translate that passion that is there among journalists, among the proper fans of the game, to someone who's a little more casual observer of the sport, who potentially will who does follow a lot of stuff, but isn't so tuned into the intricacies of the sport. So I think understanding that balance sort of helped me also find my place in sports journalism. And I've been in the field for about 7 years now.
So, how did your book, The Fire Burns Blue, happen?
For a while, we had been talking about doing a book, but there was no interest. We did pitch it to a few people. Everything changed after the 2017 World Cup, where India got to the final and they played against England at Lord's in front of a sold out crowd. During that tournament, a lot of things changed. I think, especially after the semi final where Harmanpreet Kaur hit her brilliant what's the name one. It Things changed not just for the players, I guess, but for the sport itself and for people like me who wrote about the sport also. Mm, as I said, just before the tournament, we were trying to get this book commissioned. During the tournament itself, about three publishers reached out to us and said, "Hey, do you want to write this book?" It was an incredible opportunity to sort of speak to. I think we managed to speak to about 100 people involved in the sport, especially a lot of the people who started out, who were there when the sport started out in India, and that was really fascinating to sort of hear their stories, to sort of see them as individuals also.
Sports industry is a very male dominated industry, and being a woman in this industry, what are the challenges that you faced along the way?
I mean, when you walk into a press box, you still see more men than women. Me covering women's sport meant one of the challenges was also where these events were held. So women's sport isn't too often held in the metros. It's probably in the ground that's 30 kilometers away from the city. They don't expect anyone to go to those matches. So, you line up there to cover it and no one really expects you. They don't know what to do with you once you're there. I think finding the space for women's cricket has been one of the challenges that has always been there. And when I say space, I mean the real estate on newspapers or websites or whatever, but also budgets. The calculation about how much money is a story about Shafali Verma going to get you versus, writing about, again, a cold year of Dhoni. So where do you want to put your money in? So sort of just to find that institutional backing to cover events, even the kind of stories you want to do. So say if I want to talk about sports menstruation or something like that, it's not the easiest story to get signed off by an editor. And that's changing. I mean, lots of people are doing incredible stories about really interesting things.
When we are talking about the sports industry, how important do you think are women mentors and role models? When you started out, did you have any? And
I think it's hugely important for multiple reasons. Firstly, I have found that this is an industry where you learn a lot by just being around other people who just have more experience, who know how things work. And that's, I think I mentioned this a little earlier, that's where I feel I might have had a little bit of a challenge because there's a little bit of hesitation to actually go up to someone and say, can you, can I hang around with you while you do your job? Because that's how I learned. There are, don't get me wrong, there are loads of men who are very open and very willing to sort of help. And I know loads of female journalists who would say that, they have really interesting journalists that sort of help them along. Even now, when maybe I have a bit of experience, so even in terms of sort of, managing teams, charting the path for an organization, hiring more women, I haven't seen too many people in more senior management. I can probably count off one hand the number of women, who are senior roles. And
To all the people or the girls who are aspiring to join and work in the sports industry, what would be your message or a sort of recommendation?
I think firstly would be don't hesitate to show your passion for the sport early on, like maybe in the teens or whatever. There are some girls who really into sport, and there's some who sort of fall out of love with it because it doesn't always seem like a welcoming space, because they have loads of boys, saying, why are you following this? Because they don't have enough maybe other girls to talk about it. So I think just staying in love with the sport is really nice. Find them communities. There are these communities that are there that share your passion. The second bit of advice is expand your repertoire. Um, and that goes for a knowledge beyond sport. So not just in your skills, but also your understanding. Uh, I think where sport is going, it's not just about writing about what happened in today's match, like who scored how many goals, who hit how many runs, whatever. That's not it. I think more and more the emphasis is on sort of truly understanding the people behind these numbers, and in understanding the issues, the context in which what happened. So I think it's important to not close yourself to things that happen outside of sport, and read a lot, try to understand various elements that come together to make a story. Third bit of advice would be ask for help. Most persons talk a lot about keeping your ego aside. So I think that goes for journalists as well. Not think that your opinion and that your understanding is what it is. Especially if you're writing about it, there needs to be a differentiation of what you think of the sport as a fan, and what the story you're trying to tell is. And if there's someone who's giving you that advice, it may be a senior in the industry, it may be just someone who's read your piece also. Sort of to just be open to that. I won't say criticism, but this is different viewpoints that come in, and take those on board, keeping ego aside.
You have studied women's cricket in India through the ages, and how has the narrative improved for women's cricket in India?
Firstly, it's the interest that has like so vastly changed. I know people who have worked on with the 2013 World Cup, Women's World Cup was held in India. I don't think anyone even knew about it. The final, in fact, had to be moved because they wanted to play a Ranji game in that ground. We've come a really long way from there. I know reporters who weren't keen on covering the 2016 T20 World Cup that again happened in India, who were writing about this T20 World Cup that happened in 2020. So just 4 years later, there is this understanding that this is something that's worth our attention, and that's really great. I think in a small section, understanding has improved. So it's not just about, asking what does this win mean for women in the country, but also the sort of respect that you give for any sports person, saying, okay, how has your match gone today? Like, why did you do this? What was the strategy? So that sort of articulation is there, which is great. Going beyond, well, this journalism industry, just to see the position that these women can have in society today. They, speaking just about cricket, the fact that Smriti Mandana and Jemima Rodriguez sort of had their own talk show during this lockdown, it's great. I mean, the fact that Smriti Mandana is now one of the most marketable young athletes in India. that there are brands that are coming on board, understanding their value and understanding that maybe there's also this move to back these young women. If you're asking me like things that I would like to see change some more, it's definitely in terms of institutional backing and consistent backing. So not just okay, they've done amazing at this World Cup. Let's pay them some money. Uh, to say well done. That's not it. It's about how can we start putting things in place where, like now, so that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we'll have this pool of 60, 80 cricketers who can win us World Cups and matches. I think that is important.
Is the pace of the change good enough, or there's more that should be done?
It would be lovely if things go faster. I don't think we should stop asking for more, and I don't think we should hesitate asking for more. It's not about okay, this is one good thing that's done. We can celebrate that, but I don't think we should be grateful for anything that happens now. Um, Equality is honestly the basics that can be done. So to expect gratitude for it is, I don't know, I think a bit much. I think looking outside of India, things are happening. So especially in places like Australia, there is this stated motion, movement to have uh, equality on multiple levels. And when we talk about equality, it's never just about okay, the man is getting so much and the woman is getting so much. It's about this infrastructure that you have that puts the women in a place where they can aim to even achieve the same things that a man already has. We recently did a study, a colleague Snehal and I recently did a study where where what we decided was women's sport needs to aim for equality, but while understanding that it's different, it can never be equal to men's sport because just the requirements of the people are very different. So when you talk about equality in women's sport, you need to be talking about things um, like body image, pregnancy, health, which aren't things, if you look at equality with the textbook definition, it's not what you're giving men. But in terms of bringing them up to a certain level where they can aim to achieve the same thing, all these are important. And when you talk about equality, it needs to encompass all of these things.
So do you feel that that sort of a conversation has begun in India, particularly?
Not really. I think the emphasis still is on things like facilities and say, okay, we have equal facilities for both, so everyone gets to train on the same thing. And there's still this sort of understanding that, the women don't bring in as much money as the men. And until they do that, we can't ask for a lot of these things, which is not true. The reason women's sport doesn't bring as much money as men's sport is because for the past 30 years, you haven't put in the kind of money into women's sport. You haven't invested as much in women's sport as you have in men's sport. So, expecting it to bring the same amount of money is illogical. The reason why this has happened is because of media interest. I mean, the fact is that there are more men writing about the news. That does change the narrative in a certain way. There is a lot less women's cricket, women's sport in newspapers. I think a US study put it at 4% during the lockdown, if I'm not mistaken. So that evidently shows that there's a lot of work to be done in the media. I think in terms of Indian associations particularly, it's also of me to ask what the associations themselves are doing. Are they presenting their women in a favorable light? Do they need to run campaigns? Is there sort of an understanding of what women's sport means to the country? So if there's and these are things that unless you do studies, unless you talk to researchers. I think there was a BBC study which said that in general, people in India do support women playing sport, but they also say, I don't watch it. To sort of to find the why people A aren't playing, B aren't watching, or just to find what the issues are, and then sort of then to say, okay, how can we overcome it? England just did. had this month where they celebrated Women's Cricket Month. They got the sport on BBC where it's featured. They ran this campaign. They had a lot of they got clubs involved. So I think that sort of initiative also is something that helps, like this big awareness campaign that needs to be done, and that's where there needs to be institutional will to do this and to get it going.
In the pandemic, do you think that there is a threat to women's game? Because it is highly likely that the nations would cut the budget for women's games before doing it for anything else.
On one hand, women's sport has existed in a space where it worked with very little support. It got this far because of limited support. So it's in a way in a better position to deal with something like this. I think the fear is that it's not going to be able to go to that next level, which a lot of people expected after the 2017 Women's World Cup. I think the fear is that the intent to sort of to ride this momentum may fall, but I feel like it's not as much a question of budget as it is about intent. It's just that it's really difficult to hold sports right now. And while we've seen that if people in charge want to make it happen, they can make, an IPL happen in the middle of the, in desert in a foreign country. Um, England have had this whole series. So if people want to make it happen, they can. But I think the stumbling block is maintaining that goodwill, that intent to do something for women's sport. And I think that's where we may struggle.
What are your views about the Women's T20 challenge that they're planning now?
Any cricket is great. I think it's something that players definitely need. I would like to see it as more than a token. As of now, they're still calling it exhibition game. Actually, as of now, it's being pushed as a women's IPL when it's really not. And they're still exhibition games for all practical purposes. I mean, as an exhibition of women's cricket, I think they need to go all out and make it an exhibition of women's cricket. And I think last time when I was in Jaipur was great. Loads of crowds. But I think what I would really like to see now is a proper effort to say, okay, this is what we want a women's IPL to look like in a few years from now. Whether that is, starting out with a 14 IPL and then pushing it to 8 teams, whether it's getting the existing franchises involved, whether it's the BBCI themselves saying, okay, we're going to back some franchises. But I think we're well past that time where we have to say we're still planning a women's IPL. I think we really quickly need a proper women's IPL very
And the best example can be WBBL because they're doing it so successfully. I mean, we have no excuse now.
Yeah. We've seen the benefits of the WBBL, and we've seen the benefits of WBBL for the players outside Australia as well who've been part of that competition. South Africa, I think, with some 11 players or something in the WBBL, and they've done fantastic in recent World Tournaments. The sort of intent that was showed in saying, like, I think a few months ago itself, they said, okay, we're going to aim to have a full WBBL despite the pandemic. These are our dates. This is what we're planning to do. And I think that is great. That's exactly the sort of intent that I was mentioning that needs to be there.